Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Krisler's Convos. I am joined today by Lori, and I would love, Lori, for you to just tell everyone who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. My name is Lori Fishbard. I am a clinical nutritionist and integrative health coach. I have been doing this work for about, 12 years, helping people figure out, you know, what the root of their issue is, or moving from point A to point B in their health, or healing from the various ailments that people have. And I'm located right outside of Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. And for those of you that are new to the conversation, all we do is let our guests share a little bit about their health journey and how they've used functional medicine along the way. And so that's what we're going to get into with Lori today. So actually, Lori, what I want to ask you first is, why did you even become a health coach?
It's a good question. So I was in a totally different field. I got married, wanted to start a family. I have 3 kids, but at the time I had my baby girl, and around 5 weeks, she had some major kind of GI issues. So we went to our children's hospital, saw all the specialists, and they really didn't understand why. So they told me, you know what, probably the best thing for you to do is to stop breastfeeding and to feed her this elemental formula that you can purchase, which was very expensive. And not only that, just something inside of me thought, I know that breast milk is best. I don't think 22 years ago we had the research back then that we have now, knowing just how important breast milk is for growing babies. But at the time, I was like, I want to do something. Maybe it's something I'm eating. And so I was like, I'd rather not do that. So I kind of powwowed with the doctors and said, why don't I take out all the top allergens from my diet? I did a little bit of research. It seemed like that, had worked. So I did do that. And within about 2 weeks, all of her symptoms basically disappeared. And really, that was the first time in my life that I was like, it was like this aha moment that, wow, like food has this major impact, and not even on my health, but on the health of my baby who I was feeding. And then from that point, I was like, why are we not talking about this? Why did I not know about this? Why are my doctors not talking about this? So I just started researching as much as I can. And then that led to me doing a health coaching certification program. And then that led me to totally stopping what I was doing, going back to school, getting my master's in clinical nutrition, getting licensed, and deciding that I wanted to devote my life to helping people figure this stuff out a lot easier than I had to.
Yeah. Yeah, I can connect with so many different things that you said with being in a different field, and changing course a little bit. And, when you have children, all kinds of things come up that, start your mama bear start firing, in your mind and in your heart. Having that internal kind of intuition and drive to want to learn and do more for others as well. So yeah, I can totally relate to so many things in your story. So when you have this 5-week-old baby, and things start happening that don't seem quite right, can you tell me a little bit more about what you were experiencing, what you were seeing, what you were noticing about your child?
Yeah, so she had reflux. So she would just like I'd sit there and nurse her, and it was fabulous. And then she would just throw up everything that I had just, fed her.
Yeah.
And you had to keep her upright for like a good 30 to 30 minutes to an hour to make sure that it didn't do that, but sometimes it didn't even matter. And then she had blood in her stool, which
Oh,
really
wow.
is, as a new mom, as a new parent, it's very frightening, right?
Yeah.
It's like that's kind of, and what's interesting is I have 3 kids, like I said, and that happened with all 3 kids right around the same age. So interesting.
Hmm.
And I don't know what it is or why, but I did the same thing for each kid, and for each kid, I was able to resolve the issues through my diet and eliminating those allergens. And my kids do have allergies. My oldest now has celiac disease. She was diagnosed at 14, but she's doing great. I mean, she's 22 now and on her way to medical school, which is super exciting. And then my youngest, who also had these same symptoms, kind of the reflux and the internal bleeding, he has a peanut allergy. So
Mm.
I don't know how much of it again is, they were destined to do this, or maybe it would have been worse. Like, it's hard to know. And at the time, I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't in functional medicine. I wasn't in nutrition, so I didn't really know. But I could tell you that if that happened now, I would do things so much differently, both as a pregnant woman and then breastfeeding. I would do so much more to support my microbiome. And I just didn't know. We just didn't know any of that stuff
Hmm.
20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with kind of now that having that knowledge, of course, hindsight is 2020. And so, thinking about how we typically educate women on being pregnant, it's like when you find out you're pregnant, that's when you do all the things.
Right.
However, we know that it really starts well before you're pregnant, right?
That's right.
Like you said, your microbiome, you want that to be as strong and healthy and robust as possible before you even start trying to get pregnant. So I definitely see how you would say that, because I feel the same.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know about you, but it's like when I learned something, I want to know more.
Yeah.
I learned this thing and I'm like, oh, wait, what? And then I want to know more and I want to know more. And so for myself, for the past 7 years, I have been like consuming, because I want to
Yeah.
have all the information that I possibly can to be the best that I can, but also for my children, my husband, and so forth.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can relate to that. I mean, that's really what led me. I loved the health coach training and I got so much from it, but I just felt like exactly what you said. Like, I wanted to know more. I wanted to know the why. I wanted to know the biochemistry behind it. I wanted to understand that on a whole new level. And even since graduating, I have taken like 2 or 3 certification courses because I still, first of all, the research is changing. So
Hmm.
we are all learning a lot of this for the first time, and especially around the microbiome, we're learning more and more. And so I just want to stay on top of it. I think that's a familiar thing with people in our field.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That
Just,
curiosity and love
yeah,
of learning.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel like people will go to a conventional doctor and I don't know, so, at least in my personal experience, I don't always sense that curiosity, that,
Hmm.
well, why is this happening? Like, I don't feel like that's really the central theme as far as what can we do about it. And as much as
Hmm.
I appreciate what we can do about it, because that's important, I love functional medicine, functional nutrition, because it backs it up. And it's like, why is this imbalance happening in the body? What's going on? What can we do now to prevent this from getting worse or to perhaps reverse it? And that's why one of the continuing education courses I did was just all about functional medicine and functional nutrition. And I
Hmm.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to know that how it was for you in terms of how you experienced personally, what was going on when your children were so young and they were having these physical outcomes that you were noticing. Were you experiencing anything? Were you having digestive issues or headaches or anything that also kind of went along with, maybe you didn't know at the time, but
Yeah.
also went along with this?
I think I did know at the time. I was raised really as a junk food junkie. Like my parents
Mm.
didn't know. We didn't know. Our vegetables came from a can. We didn't have a lot of fresh food. I'm from the South. We had a lot of fried foods, fast foods. Both of my parents were, obese growing up, and I just wasn't healthy. I think I went to my first Weight Watchers meeting when I was in sixth grade because
Oh, wow.
I was heavy and overweight, and my mom wanted to help me. And so I became, I started counting calories, when I was in sixth grade. And it
Wow.
really led to this very unhealthy relationship with food and a lot of yo-yo dieting. And um, I think I had constant headaches. I think I have constant stomach aches. Like it's almost like I've blocked it out. But what's interesting is when my daughter was diagnosed with celiac at 14, a few months later, I was diagnosed.
Mm,
And I don't even know how long I had it. Before that, I was also diagnosed when she was born around that time with Hashimoto's,
mm.
um, autoimmune hypothyroidism. So I got two autoimmunes under my belt. Like how many more? I don't know. I feel like I have them under control, and the goal is to not have any more. But I feel like the first 20 years of my life, I really did nothing to serve my microbiome or my health in a way that I think we've changed that for this next generation, for my three kids and for the teenagers and the families that I work with. My big thing is to educate them around how food really does have a major impact on their gut, on their microbiome, on their future health, on their epigenetics, on the expression of what genes that they're dealt with. So it's a really good point, and
Mhm.
I'm always thinking about that.
Yeah. I think that's so one of the things I love about functional medicine is the fact that there is no just one period in time that's the focus. It's
Mhm.
the whole life that's the
Right.
focus. And so, when you start coaching someone and working with someone, you're not just looking at, the last few weeks maybe where they've experiencing symptoms or even the last few months, but you go back and you start asking them questions about their childhood and they maybe express a stressor that they experienced and you have that conversation with them to draw out of them more details about that and when it was and how they experienced it and all these different things that I think people don't realize have a huge effect on us. And so when you were talking about the foods that you ate growing up, right? And the first time that you went to a Weight Watchers meeting and, other things that were going on with your parents and things like that, all of those things are so important to the whole story.
They really are. And it's funny because I have on my intake form, um, how were you born? And were you,
Mhm.
C-section or regular? And then were you breastfed or not? And, I'll have my 60-plus-year-old clients asking me, why do you need to know that? What relevance does that have with my current IBS? And I explained to them that, we have a microbiome, and either you're populated with all of that good bacteria from the get-go or you're not. And it's true that it changes over
Right.
time, but it's nice to get that, set point. It's nice to get
Hmm.
baseline and kind of know if we've been dealing with dysbiosis, dysfunction for a very long time, or if this is a relatively new thing. So yeah, that history is so important. And I do a timeline, as I'm sure you do, with all of my clients.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you were diagnosed with Hashimoto's, um, what was that like for you? Like, how did you even get to the point of that diagnosis?
How did I get to the point? My hair was falling out
Mm,
I literally had a bald spot when I think my first child was like a year, or maybe a little, maybe like 6 to 8 months. And I was always cold. Like I had those classic hypothyroid symptoms. So I
hmm.
went to get my levels checked and they were all out of whack. And then those, TPO antibodies were sky high, which indicates that it's not just hypothyroidism, but it's actually Hashimoto's. And I also had a nodule on my thyroid. I just was feeling very off. So at first I went to just a regular endocrinologist, and I remember her telling me, you have this thing, it's Hashimoto's, don't worry about it. There's absolutely nothing we can do about it. And one day, basically your body is going to attack your thyroid, and one day you're just not going to have a thyroid, and it is what it is. And I went home and I was like, that just sounds so off. Like, I mean, I wasn't even at this point, again, like in this field. I was like, that just sounds so wrong. And then I realized, because in conventional medicine, autoimmunity is this thing that's very, very hard to treat, right? It's this nebulous thing that many, there's no standard of practice for treating autoimmune disease. So I sought out alternatives. I actually ended up going to see a functional medicine practitioner, an MD who had then done some additional training in functional medicine. And he just started educating me about that it actually is tied to your gut health. It could be tied to some food sensitivities. At the time, I didn't know I had celiac, but I did eliminate gluten because there's a correlation between Hashimoto's and gluten consumption. And then things just started to get better. And whenever clients come to me and they say, I have Hashimoto's, but it's okay because I'm on Synthroid or I'm on thyroid medicine, I always say, that's great for your thyroid stimulating hormone. We need that hormone, but that doesn't address the autoimmunity piece. That doesn't address the Hashimoto's. And people still, that's sometimes a shock to them because, again, I think slowly this is, coming into, I can't wait. I hope it's in my lifetime that conventional medicine, allopathic medicine, and functional medicine can, converge more than they have. I think it's happening. But it hasn't happened yet. And so a lot of people are surprised when they hear that TSH or that Synthroid is not addressing the autoimmunity piece.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear so many people say, that they went to their doctor, whether it's a gastroenterologist, a dermatologist, a gynecologist, whatever, and they're told it is what it is. You just have to deal with it, or take this medication and maybe it will help you.
Right.
And it's so deflating for so many people. For some people, it's almost like that's the spark that makes us want to seek out alternatives.
Right.
And for some people, they just are like, okay, well, this is what I'm being told. This is what I have to do. And they don't really have much hope for change or for something better. And it's really sad. It's sad in many cases that people don't know, or they don't have that desire or maybe understanding that they can even seek a second opinion or find out more information.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I agree.
I love that you just knew there was something in you that said, well, I don't know if this is right. And you just sought more information, sought different help.
Yeah. And fast forward, I have no nodules on my thyroid anymore. My TSH is totally under control. My hair is just fine. Like, I'm really so happy with where I am with my Hashimoto's now. And I never, ever would have gotten there without going to see a functional medicine practitioner.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I think about with your situation is you mentioned that your child was very young. And so a lot of times after you have a baby, of course, your hormones are shifting and changing all over the place, and your hair does either break off or fall out. And so again, for any women who are out there who are in this situation, yes, that may be happening. And in some cases that is normal because of the hormone shifts. However, it's okay to ask.
That's right.
It's okay to say, these things are happening. Is there something I can do? Is there information I can read? Is there, whatever? But ask those questions. It's okay. It's perfectly within your right to do so.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think I did wait a long time because I read that it's normal, and hopefully things would just kind of, even out and calm down, but it didn't. And that's when I was like, yeah, I want to go ask, I want to see if there's something else going on. And boy, there was. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that I did.
Yeah. And so you've mentioned the TSH, which we know is the thyroid stimulating hormone, and conventional medicine typically, that's the only marker that conventional medicine will test for. But share a little bit more about other markers, maybe that if someone out there is like, this kind of sounds like me, you know, what else could they ask their doctor about testing or looking for?
Yeah. I always ask my clients to go to their doctor and ask for a full thyroid panel, which involves all the hormones that are basically involved with how the mechanics of the thyroid are working. So you have the TSH, which is the thyroid stimulating hormone. You have T3 and T4, which are the two like other hormones that the body needs. And then you have TPO antibodies, which are if you do have autoimmunity, then those would probably be elevated. I forget what number. I think it's like if it's over 0.09 or something, it's indicative of autoimmunity. And then there's free T4 and free T3, which is the T4 and the T3 that's circulating in the bloodstream. And then there's things called reverse T3 and uptake T3. And basically, it's as much information as we can gather about how the thyroid is working. And a lot of times I'll give a full list to a client and they'll come back to me and they'll say, you know what, my doctor just ran TSH and T4 maybe, because that's kind of the active form. T3 converts to T4, if I'm getting that right. And they'll say they didn't run the whole thing for me because there's nothing that they would do different. The only kind of strategy that they have or tool that they have in their toolbox is to give a prescription for that TSH, that main thyroid stimulating hormone. And the problem with that is that, and this is kind of my problem with conventional medicine as a whole, even though I am not knocking it, because if I break my arm, I want to go to a doctor to fix that. There's so much space, I feel like, for both modalities. But the one thing that is, just did not serve me is that kind of in conventional medicine with the thyroid, you get it and you're fine, your values are fine, your values are fine, your values are fine. And then all of a sudden they're not fine, boom, you're sick.
Right.
And I want to know like what the pattern of, well, all those fines, even though you were under the, under whatever it was, the bracket for being not fine, if we saw, for instance, that there was kind of an upward slope, well, we can go in and do something about that. We can intervene with food or lifestyle or perhaps supplementation. We know that selenium, for instance, is an important mineral for the thyroid. We know iodine is very important for the thyroid. So there are things we could do to support this organ before we get to, oh, you have hypothyroidism, and now we're going to give you Synthroid.
Right.
That's kind of my issue with it is, if we look at these other values, maybe we could get some clue. You know what, this T4 looks really low, or this T3 and then we could start to maybe, use some other lifestyle changes, food interventions, perhaps supplements to boost up one's thyroid health so we don't get to that point where they need to be on medication for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. Obviously we need surgeons, we need ER docs and nurses, and, we need people who can deal with the acute illnesses. But, when it comes to these chronic illnesses, which, many hundreds of thousands of people are dealing with every single day, there's a reason for those, right? It's not that you just woke up one day and all of a sudden you have diabetes. Like this is a long time coming. So maybe if we started here, in addressing some of those lifestyle things, modifying behaviors and so forth, then we would have, not have gotten here, but cut that off at the pass. And so I think that's a really, really good point, is that there is space for both.
That's right.
We need both. Yeah.
We do need both.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about the celiac that you've mentioned a couple of times. Tell folks that are not familiar with that, what that is.
Oh, sure. So celiac disease is an autoimmune condition where the villi, so these little micro finger-like little things, they look like this, that line the small intestines, become blunted in the presence of gluten. So gluten just makes them blunt and makes them kind of like stop working. So gluten is kind of like a trigger. And the reason that's a problem is because these villi help you absorb your nutrients. That's where we absorb the majority of our nutrients, is in the small intestines. And so normally for celiac disease, it's kind of the one autoimmune that has a very clear focus standard of practice. You give up gluten. You don't have any gluten. And then what should happen is that your villi are happy again. They start being healthy and you start absorbing all the nutrients. Depending on when you get celiac, that's not always the case, because maybe somebody has had celiac at their villi. Even when you remove the trigger of gluten, they're still not the healthiest they could be. Perhaps there are other triggers, because gluten can be cross-reactive with other things like corn, like dairy, oats. There's more. It'll come to me. But different other triggers are causing the same reaction, even though it's not gluten. And so when my daughter was diagnosed and then I was diagnosed, we of course went gluten-free 100%. And that is hard to do because gluten hides in many places. But even after being gluten-free for a good maybe 6 months to a year, we still weren't feeling like 100%. We were feeling a lot better. And some of the major symptoms and digestive issues that I was dealing with and that she was dealing with went away, but we still weren't feeling our best. And that's again when I used a functional medicine approach, because I was like, I want to look at how we're absorbing vitamins and minerals. What is our vitamin and mineral status? And there are functional tests that can tell us that. What does our microbiome look like? What does our gut lining look like? What are our inflammatory markers in our gut? That's what functional microbiome testing can do. So I spent a lot of time figuring out, even did some food sensitivity testing, found out we were both cross-reacting to other foods, gave those foods up for a little bit while we healed our guts to kind of get us to a better place. And I think a lot of people, when they get that celiac diagnosis, they give up gluten, and that's hard enough, and it is. But if they're not feeling better, I guess I just want people to know that there's so much more you can do, because it is an autoimmune disease. It's not just a gluten allergy. It's really not a gluten allergy at all. It's this response that your villi are having to this trigger. And for some people who have celiac, they're told not to have gluten. They eliminate gluten and they're just fine. They bounce back just fine. But I think it's underdiagnosed in this country. I think it's missed a lot, obviously. When my daughter was diagnosed, it was really, and I love her pediatrician, it was, her pediatrician and me really coming together, just saying, let's just start. It wasn't obvious that it would be celiac. We were just like, let's throw that in the mix. And sure enough, her blood work came back positive. And then in this country, we do an endoscopy to confirm diagnosis and to actually look at the villi, and hers were squashed. So that's what it was, but it's not always clear cut. It's not always you eat gluten, you have a stomach ache, you have constipation, you have celiac. Like, it just doesn't work like that. It could be brain fog. It could be reoccurring headaches. I mean, I had headaches my whole life. Never did anyone test me for celiac. If they would I have been positive and maybe could have changed things earlier? Maybe so. My daughter had weird, like, urinary, like bladder symptoms. She also had balance things going on, like really out of the box symptoms. So I feel like that's kind of a misnomer that celiac is stomach ache when I eat gluten. And if you don't have that, you don't have celiac. And I wish we would just kind of test more for it. And just so we don't miss some of these people who don't present maybe, as standard as other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love how that really gives a good example of individuality. You have
Yes.
two people with the same diagnosis from the same family, same, or shared genes,
Yeah, right.
and yet the symptoms presented differently. And so again, for people who are watching, it's so important for you to understand that yes, there's overlap in symptoms. However, they don't always present the same exact way. And so that's why it's perfectly acceptable for you to say, this doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain this further? Can you give me more information? Can you test me for this? Right? Advocate for yourself. You can do that in a respectful manner. Asking for help is not disrespectful. It's asking for help.
Yeah, it's so important to advocate for yourself, and I'm so glad that you're cheering your listeners on to do that, because I think people are scared. I think they look at, I don't know, doctors as kind of the end all be all, and they don't want to be disrespectful. And I think that this generation is changing that. I see that in my kids, that they're able to respectfully ask more questions and kind of understand more about what's going on. But I think the biggest question people can ask is, why? Can we get more information? Are there more tests that can be run? And if you're getting, no or gaslit, or you don't like how you are, you don't like the responses, there are so many other practitioners that can be helpful, especially in the functional medicine space, because that's what functional medicine is all about, is going back and finding everybody's individual root cause, which, to your point, can be very different depending on your health history and your timeline and all of these things that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And so I hope more and more people embrace functional nutrition and functional medicine. And I do believe it is the future of medicine. I really do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've really talked a lot about nutrition in our conversation, but I'm curious, is there something else that you have found that has helped you um, in your health journey? Any other, behaviors or modifiable lifestyle factors that you've been able to embrace for yourself that have really helped you?
I mean, so many. I just live such a different life than I used to. From, exercising, I'm an avid exerciser. I exercise 6 days a week and walk on one day, and I do a ton of strength training, which, as somebody with celiac, they are concerned about your bone health. So I actually had a bone density scan earlier. I'm 54, but they don't really tell you to do that until you're 60, I believe is the recommended age. But I did it at 50. And my doctor told me that I had the bones of a 28-year-old. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited, because, with celiac, I thought that perhaps it would affect that. And he's like, you must do a lot of strength training. I'm like, yeah, I've been strength training forever. And I think it makes such a difference. And that's another thing for people who are just constantly running on the treadmill or just doing that cardio, like, especially for women, we need to use our muscles, and we need to do that. So I'm a big exerciser. I'm a big proponent of sleep.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Say it louder for the people in the back.
Exactly. I mean, I just don't get why we don't prioritize sleep. And for my clients, we will just spend so much time on this, because everybody needs more sleep. It's just so much more restorative, and that's when the magic happens. So I make sure that I set an alarm at night to go to sleep. Instead of setting that alarm in the morning, I make sure that I have a time. And I also live by no eating at night. So I like to have between 2 to 3 hours. And again, all of this stuff I preach to my clients and my patients, but I would be a big old hypocrite if I didn't do it myself. Not to say that I don't sometimes have a late dinner, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Or have
sure.
it,
Yeah.
but 90% of the time, I try to allow at least 2 to 3 hours between the last thing that goes into my mouth and when I'm going to sleep, because it does affect our sleep quality and our
Yeah.
digestion. And I use a number of different supplements that support my gut. I eat a lot of pre and probiotic rich foods, and sometimes if foods aren't enough, I will do some high quality supplements, and I'm a big snob about supplements. So I really like to have ones that A, will make a big difference, and B, are third party tested and all of that stuff. I do infrared sauna. I have infrared lights. What else do I do? I've never been able to be like a meditator, although I so understand the importance of nervous system, down regulation. But I do a lot of breathing, and I do a lot of kind of my own type of meditation, which is really just my own little version of it, but it's slowing down it's getting into that parasympathetic nervous system. So I try to do as many things as I can to support what we know contributes to a healthy lifestyle.
Right.
And, we do our best.
Absolutely. And, I want for people who are listening, who maybe you're at the beginning of your journey, to remember that, Lori has been going through this for many years, right? So she does do a lot of different things, and she's built that consistency and found what works for her. So, at the beginning of your journey, maybe you choose one area to dive into, right? You choose nutrition, or you choose exercise, or you choose sleep. Whatever that is for you, start in one place and build some consistency there, and then add something else, right? And build the consistency there. That, I think, is the most important piece of this, is when you start, stick with it, build consistency, make it long term, and you'll see the long term results. And then you'll be able to add more things.
That's right. I think it's a lot of small changes done incrementally that you just kind of keep adding on to. I do believe that. And when I coach, and I'm sure you're the same way, I'm not giving a list of 17 things to people to do, right, in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm not saying go do all these things exactly. We'll pick one or two things, and I always meet people where they are and move at their speed, because you're just not going to be successful otherwise. And that's why I think health coaching is so great. And I'm glad I have that as the foundation before I did my clinical nutrition work, because it really teaches us how behavior is modified and how to, support somebody through that process of perhaps changing a bad habit into a good habit. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's
It
really
is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because, some of the things that we do are very simple things. However, if we've been avoiding them, or we have some sort of even trauma that's related to why we do it or why we don't, and we've never acknowledged that or healed from that, then it can be very difficult to, add those behaviors in or change them.
Yeah, it's true. I could give you so many examples of clients I'm working with now where they're doing so many things right, but there's just a few things that are just kind of holding them back, but they're not able to get rid of. And I feel like sometimes, if it's trauma related, like you almost need like a team. You just need a team working for you, right?
Right.
To kind of help you get over the hurdles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Lori, this has been such an enriching and fun conversation. I'm so glad to have you on with us. I'm sure folks are wondering, how they can get in touch with you, or maybe just send you an email or something to ask some questions. So where can they find you?
Yes, thank you. So I am on Instagram at Healthy Heartbeat, 2 E's, beat, like the vegetable. And then my website is healthyheartbeat.com. Those are probably the two best places to reach me. And then you can contact me through my website or see me on Instagram. I'm actually running a food as medicine program starting on January 22nd, which is, it's called my winter cleanse. I don't want to scare anybody away with the word cleanse. I just use it as like this umbrella term for just clean eating and a lot of good self-care. But there's information on my website and on my Instagram about that. And enrollment is still open. If anybody wants to join, I'd love to support you. And that's a nice group program that I run. And then I also do one-on-one work as well.
Awesome. Well, I will put that information in the show description so folks will be able to easily find you. And again, thank you so much for sharing your story and giving us all the details. And for those of you that enjoyed the conversation, please give us a like and comment. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of the combos. And until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.